Hello again. I'm Paul Estabrooks, and last week I told you the story of one of my more traumatic trips when I lost half my tour group on a trip to Siberia en route to China. Although the trip ended very well and very happily, and everyone actually enjoyed that trip. Today I'd like to tell you about the trip planned the year after. In 1994, I planned a trip for interested travelers who traveled with me to places we had never been before, and I had never been before. So we had a double trip planned, and that was to be a trip to Tibet in the southern part of China, officially part of China, but a totally different culture, high in the highest altitudes where people live, in the Himalayan mountains, and the capital city being Lhasa, where tourists were welcome. But you did have to do a lot of preparation, and you had to apply. You had to have special application to go to Tibet. The second week, we planned to go to North Korea. And our agent in Beijing, Stephen, worked out all of the planning and the paperwork. We forwarded our photocopies of passports and anything that the North Koreans wanted, because I always wanted to do a prayer walk in this country, which was most restricted country in the world. So that was the plan. We made our plans, and we worked hard at fulfilling these plans. 16 people decided this would be a trip of a lifetime, and they joined me. 15 others joined me, making us 16 people to go to Tibet and North Korea. So we fly to Hong Kong, and we start our trip in Hong Kong. Open Doors had an office there at that time, and we picked up what they asked us to take into the country. Now, in the 90s, we were still delivering Bibles and Christian materials into China by suitcasing method, by couriers traveling. And that was to be part of our trip. They gave us 16 heavily packed bags just full of materials. It was incredible. They had Chinese Bibles. They had actually hymn books. I don't remember taking those before. We had videos, the Jesus video in Mandarin. And we had Josh McDowell's book called More Than a Carpenter, and a number of other things. I could not even list for you all the different type of things. It was the most diverse group of materials that I'd ever taken into China. And they were all packed in 16 heavy bags. And we kept them all in one bag because we had a plan. And our plan was to store these bags somewhere en route and then go up to Tibet, come back down from there and pick up the bags and go on to Beijing. Beijing was the delivery point for this Christian materials, which our group was going to be taking into the country. Well, that was our plan. And we started out, and we flew. The travel plan was Hong Kong to Chengdu, which is a city in China. If you're going to Tibet, you would either take the train from there or you would fly from there in an airplane. We would love to have taken the train. I always enjoyed train rides, but it takes more time, and we had only 2 weeks for a total vacation trip, and 1 week in Tibet, 1 week in North Korea. So we decided to fly. We flew into Chengdu and spent an overnight there at a hotel. And according to our plan, we were to leave our heavy bags, 16 bags, take our personal suitcases with us up to Lhasa, Tibet. Well, things just didn't work out according to our plans. And you know, it reminded me of a scripture that is so potent and so poignant. Proverbs 16 verse 9 states a principle that I've found true all my life. It said, "We can make our plans, but the Lord determines our steps. And boy, did this trip ever reveal that to me in a very different way. So we get to Chengdu. I go to the hotel manager and I say, we have some materials that we're taking to friends in Beijing. Can we leave 16 suitcases here at the hotel, to pick up on our way back? And the manager said, no, we don't have that kind of capability. Chengdu was a large city numerically, but not a big spot for tourists per se. And they just didn't have that capability. So we're thinking, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? Oh, okay, we'll do the next best thing. We'll store these extra bags at the airport. So the next morning we get to the airport to fly to Lhasa, Tibet. And would you believe this was like a small domestic airport? There was nowhere to leave our bags, and no one who we could trust to leave these bags with, actually, as well. Well, we made our plans, but the Lord directed our steps. We had no choice but to lug these heavy bags with us all the way up to Lhasa. Somehow we were able to get them on the plane without much overweight charge. And they even went through security. I mean, imagine, these are just security checks, but these people still work for the government and whatnot. So what we had to do was have our bags go through those machines that could check and almost read the titles of books inside. They were so accurate, and take them there. However, we had gone through customs safely in departing Hong Kong and arriving at Chengdu. And then as we went to Lhasa, we had to go through another security check, and these bags were just full of books, basically, and that was it. But nobody said anything, and we had no problems with that. And but man, we had 32 check-in bags, 16 of our own, with all of our own personal stuff, and 16 with all these materials. And we dragged them upstairs ourselves because they were so heavy to our rooms. That was the first time we noticed how challenging it is to be at the highest altitude in the world where people live. First of all, we saw people having nosebleeds constantly. There are people be walking around with a cloth, even locals, under their nose because their nose would bleed because of the high altitude. And when you went up the stairs, if you went quickly at all, and I'm talking about just a fast walk, you would suddenly get dizzy. And if you ever ran up the stairs, which I tried to do once, you could almost keel over because your head is in a spin from the thin air that there is there. We had one lady in the group who later had such a problem with it that she had to go on oxygen, and then we had to fly her out early from the city. But we are now in Lhasa, and we have all of these bags. And we're thinking, why on earth did our plans not work? And we have no idea. Well, we were soon to find out. We stayed at the Holiday Inn, which is amazing when you think of a very, very third world country. Tibet is very different from the rest of the world, and yet here in their capital city is a Holiday Inn, part of the Holiday Inn chain that served Western food as well as Asian food in a buffet style for every meal of the day. And we fared very well. One night we went out for Tibetan food, and there weren't many of us that actually enjoyed it, partially because they use yak fat to cook almost everything. Yak fat is what they make the candles of when you go to their Buddhist temples, which we visited. The smell of candles burning is the smell of yak fat. And the food tasted almost much like the candles smell. So everything is cooked in this yak fat, and it's very different for those of us who have Western palates. But we survived, and it was a very interesting place to be. Before we had left on the trip, one of my best friends in Toronto, Bob Morris, who is now with the Lord, Bob gave me a gift for a Canadian girl who was there in the country studying the language. And we thought, wow, that's interesting. She said she's at the university. There's only one in Lhasa. She's living in the dorm at university. If you go to the university, would you kindly give her this gift from me? Well, we were very happy to do that. Always nice to meet another Canadian as you're traveling internationally. And so after we had everything settled and we got into our major touring around the capital city of Tibet and praying around the temples and whatnot that we did, we decided we'll go check out and see if we can find Julia, I think her name was. Now, the challenge in Lhasa was even greater than in China general. Because, for example, you go to Shanghai and the streets names on the street signs are both in English and Chinese. And so, with English, you can look at a map and you can figure out your way around pretty well, without any help at all or having to ask for questions. But in Tibet, everything was in Tibetan and Chinese, no English at all. And we couldn't even find a city map. So we had to ask a lot of questions, ask for a lot of help, and we had a traveling companion who spoke a little bit of Russian, and Evelyn came and joined me to try and find Julia. We found the university. We came to the gate and we asked the man if we could go and visit Julia. He said, "Wait a minute." He did understand some English. And he said, "I will telephone her." He phoned, no answer. So he said, "Just wait here." So we sat and waited and waited. And we waited for about an hour. Nothing happened. And so finally we went back to him and we said, "We just have a gift to drop off for her. Can we go to her door and just maybe leave it at her door for her?" And he said, "Yeah, okay." So he said, "Is that building over there, number 2 building?" She lives in the only apartment that's on the main floor. So we walk over to this building and we knock on her door, and of course there's no answer. It turned out that Julia was out taking pictures of the city, believe it or not, on that very day, which she was going to be sending home to Canada to friends of hers there to show them what it was like where she was living and studying the Tibetan language. So we're knocking on the door, no answer. And so we set the gift down on the floor at the door. And suddenly we hear an English voice up the staircase. There's a young lady leaning over the case and she says, "Are you looking for Julia?" And we said, "Yes, we are." I said, "We're from Canada. We're from her country and somebody sent a gift for her." And she said, "Oh, well, she's out, but I'm sure she'll be back soon. Would you like to come up and have tea with us while you're waiting for her?" And we had no other commitments that afternoon. And so we said, "Okay, it's fine." So we took the gift and went up to this apartment upstairs. A lovely couple. And they were also in Lhasa studying the language. And we began to talk. Now, when you're doing anything clandestine, you're usually very careful about what you say to strangers. But we immediately felt very, very much at home with this couple. And we said, they said, "What brought you to Tibet?" And we said, "Well, we think the Lord brought us to Tibet because we came to pray for this country and for the people in this country." And she said, "Oh, the Lord did he?" She said, are you folks Christians?" And we said, "Yes, we are." And she said, "Oh, so are we." And I said, "Oh, that's interesting." And I said, "We've heard that there is just one major house church here in Lhasa of Christians, local Christians, and we don't know anything about that group. Do do you know anything about the group of Christians who meet here in this city? And she smiled. The wife smiled, and she said, you are sitting on the chairs where 2 hours ago they met for a secret meeting together. Whoa, this is incredible. Here we are, just following a plan to deliver a gift to Julia, and we end up in an apartment where the secret house church had just met on that very day. She said they meet in different places every time they meet, and there are indeed, as you suspected and heard, there are about 30 people in the group. And I said, well, do you have Bibles for everyone, or do you have other books or anything like that for them? And she said, oh no, you can't get those things here. They do a lot of handwritten material, and they share things, and then it hit me, boom. Sometimes this skull is very thick, and it takes a while. Why did the Lord not enable us to leave our bags in Chengdu? Because they were loaded with materials that would have been perfect for this group. So we said, okay, well, we made a plan. We said, we have friends, we are 16 in our group, and some of our other friends in the group would love to meet you guys too. And we'll ask them to come and bring you some materials for the group. As we left then, after our tea and fellowship with this couple, Julia had arrived in her apartment downstairs. We knocked on her door, and there she was. She was so delighted to get this special gift that came from Bob Morris, which we carried, and we had a nice chat with her. We rush back to our hotel, and we tell the group, you won't believe this, but we found the place where the one house church in this city meets. At least today they met there. And there's that this couple know who they are, and you can we can leave some materials here. So we all drag out our bags into one room. Imagine 16 heavy bags of materials. We pull into one room, and we unload everything to see what we have. And we were staggered because we didn't pack those bags, and they were just materials to drop to friends in Beijing. So we put everything on the two beds in the room that Jim and I, my buddy Jim Cunningham was my roommate, and we piled everything up there, and we took 30 copies of everything. So there were Bibles, there were even some hymn books. There was, as I mentioned, Josh McDowell's book, More Than a Carpenter. There were Jesus videos, and a number of other materials I can't even remember. And there were a lot. And so then we took some of those empty bags and put 30 copies of everything that we had into them, made them like heavy shoulder bags. And a group from our team went and visited this couple later and was able to leave this material for the house church in Lhasa, Tibet. No plan, nothing, but we realized that we can make our plans, but the Lord determines our steps. And it was so significant that this happened, and we were able to leave a good portion of that stuff. And we lugged up there, grumbling probably most of the way that we had to carry these heavy bags all this way before we could get rid of them in Beijing. While we were there in Tibet, this trip was in the first 2 weeks of July in 1994. On Friday, July the 8th, Kim Il-sung, what they call the eternal leader, died. And unlike Jesus, he didn't rise again. He's still in the grave. But Kim Il-sung died. And on Saturday, the next day, we all flew back to Beijing to pick up our visas to go to North Korea the next week. Well, guess what? When Stephen went to pick up our visas and with our passports, they told him, sorry, we've canceled all tourist visits because we are mourning the death of the great leader, Kim Il-sung. And so from July 8 to July 17, the whole country shut down in North Korea and just spent those days, 10 days, in mourning the loss of their leader. He was 82 years of age, and he died of a heart attack and was not able to be resuscitated. That put a kink into our plans again. Now we aren't going there, and I will share with you, God willing, in future weeks that we tried again the next year at the same time and got the same answer at the last minute. Finally, in 2010, 16 years after this first trip I'm telling you about, I finally got to go to North Korea with a group of Canadians, and that's a story for another day. But Stephen arranged for us to visit other parts of China that we still hadn't seen yet. It's a huge country, and there's many wonderful places to see and visit in the country of China. So for our second week, instead of going to North Korea, we went through other parts of China, had a great time. Well, of course, we ended up staying for a few days in Beijing, and we went out to the Great Wall, as is the usual custom for anybody visiting, especially if it was your first time to China. You always want to walk on the Great Wall, and we did that. And this picture I'm showing you is Jim and me with our shirts on from the Holiday Inn in Lhasa, Tibet. I just wanted to prove to you that we really were in Tibet. And we've been climbing the wall, and we're sweating like crazy, and stop and have somebody took our photo together again on the Great Wall with our Tibetan shirts of the Holiday Inn there in Beijing. Well, the other thing in Beijing that we were able to do was, again, to visit with dear little Auntie Mabel. And I've told you the story in an earlier video. You can see it in this series if you check Auntie Mabel, M-A-B-E-L. Her Chinese name was Mei Bo, but when you say Mei Bo quickly, in English, it sounds like Mabel. And that's what we called her. She was an amazing single lady. At this time, she was about 90. She was a medical doctor and now retired, and spent all of her time leading people to faith in Jesus and discipling them. And that was her whole life. She, however, in her late 80s, had gone to Tibet as a missionary, and she planted that house church that was in Lhasa. And so we were delighted to be able to tell. She heard that we had been there. She said, "You must tell me about your trip. What happened?" And so we met with her again. And of course, I told you before, this medical doctor's favorite place to have a meal together with guests from outside the country was McDonald's, because she loved cheeseburgers and chocolate milkshakes. The first doctor I met who thrived on that, and she lived to 99 years of age before she passed away, and she was mobile right up till the day she died. Auntie Mabel was just a delightful person, and she sang for us. We're sitting in McDonald's, and she's singing out loud. Everybody's watching and listening. It was great. She said, "I taught them some choruses. He is Lord, He is Lord. He is risen from the dead, and He is Lord. Every knee shall bow, every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord." She said, "I taught them that one, and I taught them, I have decided to follow Jesus. No turning back, no turning back." And she shared with us the challenges this elderly single lady had as a missionary to what she called the darkest place in our country, and nobody else is going there, so God told me to go, and it was great. But she gave us her finale statement, which I'm not sure I did share this in the last video about her. She gave us her theology of the end times, And she said, Jesus is saying, you guys need to hurry up and get the job done so I can come back again. Well, there's a scripture in Matthew 24 where Jesus told his disciples, this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all of the world to all nations, that's all people groups, and then the end shall come. And Auntie Mabel's interpretation of that is, you guys need to get the job done, Jesus says, so I can come back again. And that was just a delight to be with her. And now she is with Jesus, who she served so faithfully. That was the trip of 1994, and I learned a lot, but mostly that the scripture is true. We can make our plans, but the Lord determines our steps.